Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Azure All Stars show, where we put the spotlight on stars from the community and the work they do in the hopes of inspiring others to follow through. I'm Ahmed,
And I'm Luke,
and we
and
are
we are your hosts.
hosts for this podcast. Yeah, and our amazing our amazing guest today. Yeah, our amazing guest today is Rory. He is a very big influencer in the community, in the Auckland community and the whole of Azure community, actually in New Zealand. He does, I know this from my personal experience, he does a lot of work that actually a lot of people don't actually see. He's bringing it all together. He is always making us what is the word? Making sure that we are on schedule and then bringing all the right people for the Azure community, the Aotearoa Azure community. And I'm really inspired by that. So thank you for that, Rory. And yeah, so let's start.
Cool.
Hi.
Hi,
Hey.
Rory.
So Rory, first question. Every tech journey is unique. Can you share a bit about how you took your first steps into technology?
Yeah, sure. So I've been in this industry for a long time. In fact, next year I will have been in this industry for 50 years.
Wow.
So,
Oh my
so
God.
50 years ago,
Good on you.
computer science or computers were completely different.
Hmm.
So I grew up in Malawi, which is in Central Africa, and
Wow.
I went to university in South Africa. And Malawi had exchange controls, so my parents couldn't send me a lot of money. So I used to work in the university computer center every night from
Nice.
like 7 to midnight, and then I'd go and study, and then I'd hit the lectures at 7:30.
Wow.
So so yeah, it was. We had big mainframes then. They had a big IBM 360,
Wow.
and the languages that we used were Fortran and COBOL. So that
Yeah.
was the era of punch cards. So you wrote your stuff on a coding sheet, and someone typed it up, and you ran it through a card reader, and then it came up with errors, and then you had to go and update the cards and rinse and repeat. It was very different from stuff that we do today.
Yeah.
Uh,
The word
and so,
cloud hadn't been invented yet, right?
no. The internet hadn't been invented,
Holy
actually.
moly.
There was no
Wow.
internet then. Um,
Wow.
and so we used IBM 360 assembler language, which was actually quite complex and
Mm.
was a bit hard for first years. So we actually wrote an assembler interpreter, which used a subset of the language. We wrote that in Fortran, and that was the stuff that was used for first years, just to get into the whole
Wow.
assembler concept of accumulators and registers and all that kind of stuff. And so that's what I did to start off with, working on IBM and Burroughs mainframes. They were huge beasts. That old computer room, it had air conditioning, it had false floors for all the cables. Yeah, it was a very,
Wow.
very different time.
Wow.
So in 1981, I think it was, the first IBM PC came out, and that had a whole 640K of memory. And it's amazing what you can do with 640K of memory, because that also included the operating system
Wow.
when you have to, right? And in
Hmm.
fact, that first IBM PC didn't have a hard drive because the gurus at IBM decided that no one would ever need enough storage to justify a hard drive. You just put it on a little diskette, those old floppy diskettes. So that was kind of the thinking then.
Yeah.
Wow.
And also they published a little manual, which I bought. Unfortunately, I lost it somewhere along the way, which had the entire operating system written in 8086. As I spent like hours studying this to try and figure out how this thing worked.
Wow.
But I guess from when you do that, what happens is you kind of get a really good idea of how a computer works and how the operating system works.
I guess, yeah, yeah.
And then there was because that obviously ran MS-DOS, but there was another operating system called CPM, which was pretty big then, which stands for Control Program for Microcomputers.
Wow, I never heard of that.
No,
And
neither.
yeah, it was pretty big. And the company I was working for then wasn't using the PCs; it was using a mini computer. So we actually got an old one that they wanted to scrap, and we imported a copy of CPM from the States. And CPM, you just get the kernel. So we had to write a BDOS. So you set up a big table which describes your disk in terms of tracks and sectors and all that kind of stuff. And then you had to write a BIOS, which basically takes the output from CPM and puts it on your device, which could be a monitor, or it could be like a really simple LED, and takes your keystrokes and puts them in. And then the first problem we found is that it was actually written in 8086, and we didn't have an 8086 compiler. So we first had to write a cross compiler. So this was all in our own spare time, right?
Wow.
This was us having fun, basically.
It makes me wonder how how popular computers were back then.
Yeah, so they were. I mean, people bought all those like early Apples and the Commodores and all those early things. They were really pretty basic. So we wrote a cross compiler, and we got that, and then we couldn't get it to work, so we had to write our own debugger. And eventually we got CPM to load on this thing, which was like a huge step forward. And then CPM, you could buy programs, just like you can buy programs for Windows. And there was a whole lot of games, but we mainly used it once we got it to work to play Star Trek, which was an old game from. There was a book by David Hall called Basic Computer Games, which we bought, and it was actually a book of basic programs. But of course, there were no scanners or anything then, so you literally had to type in the whole program. Literally, you literally took the book and typed it in.
Because they wouldn't have had floppy disks or anything then either.
Well, they did have floppy disks and things, but the book wasn't available on a floppy disk. No one was selling floppy disks with this book on, because they think that you bought the book. And if you're interested in that kind of era that I've just been talking about, on my blog, which is on Medium, called The New Control Plane, I actually wrote an article a while back, and it's called 10 Awesome Things I Remember About Computers Back in the Day. So go and have a read of that.
Yeah, I'll go look it up.
Go and have a read of that. If it kind of goes into that whole era and just how different it was. And then the web came out in the early 90s, right? And that was, in those days, you probably got one new website a day if you were lucky. I mean, the web was very small. Yahoo started out by two guys who were literally indexing the web, right, by hand, writing little kind of blogs about interesting sites that's how Yahoo started, with these two guys manually just finding sites and stuff. And then in 1993, Mosaic came out. So Mosaic was the very first browser written by NCSE in the States, by a guy called, you may have heard of him, Mark Andreessen, who went on to be the chief CEO of Netscape, which was a big browser competitor to.
Is he the one who created JavaScript, or that's another guy?
No, that's another guy. And now he's a very big venture capitalist.
Yeah. Right.
And so I was like really intrigued by this thing, because I'd never actually seen a browser before. And so I downloaded the whole thing, and we didn't have fiber then. We had those crappy modems that you had to dial up, and I had a 2400 baud modem, which was about 14 kilobits a second. And it took me like the whole weekend to download it at work, to download this browser. And once I saw it, I was like, oh my God.
It was worth the weekend.
It was worth, you could just see the future, like all this, things that we all take for granted, like, hyperlinks and all that kind of stuff, and images, because remember, before it was MS-DOS, it was command line, right? It was all text. And suddenly this was graphics, and you could click on hyperlink. I was like, oh my God, this was awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was like kind of the early days. And then in 2011, Microsoft brought out ADFS, which is Active Directory Federation services, which basically puts the WS Federation protocol on top of on-premise AD.
Mhm.
And at the same time, they bought out this concept of claims-based authentication,
Okay.
which is like the whole concept that you get, a token back that contains the claims, and the claims have common names, and it's suddenly so much easier to you don't have to invent your own authentication and authorization. And so I kind of got into that because that just looked like something that was going to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And in fact, I gave a talk to the user group in 2012, to the North Shore user group. I think it was like the first talk in the country on claims-based identity. And there's a book that you can still download today. It's called A Guide to Claims-Based Identity and Access Control. But what's interesting is, this was like the first book that kind of went into it in fairly detailed stuff.
But you didn't
But
have to type back into a computer.
No. No,
Exactly.
you could just download it on the internet.
Woohoo! Woohoo for the
so-
internet.
So what's interesting is the people that wrote it. So one of the guys was Dominic Bauer, who basically is one of the guys with Brock Allen who wrote Identity Server, and now, of course, runs Duende Software. And Vittorio Bertucci, who was the Microsoft Claims dude. He had a blog. He gave lots of talks. He's now with, he went to Aotearoa, which is now Okta. And then Eugenio Pace and Matthias Volosky were also authors, and they are the two guys that started Aotearoa. So it was like this cast of stars that wrote this book. But when I got the book, these guys, they all just worked for Microsoft, and they've all gone on to have like really stellar careers.
Wow. What a journey. Oh my God. I was not prepared for this answer. This is so beautiful. This is really just beautiful. Thank you for sharing this. The rest of this answer, I don't know. Like, this is just an amazing answer. Thank you for that.
This could be an episode on its own, right?
Seriously, oh my God. I'm just like, I was lost in the details. I loved it all. Yeah. You are also, which is super amazing. Like, you are on the top of the game, and you are on the top 0.49 contributor to Stack Overflow in the Microsoft Identity category, which is not a small feat. And so the question is like, what drive you to be so active? And actually, the other question is that I've tried this before, like answering questions, and I do love like solving a puzzle. But the problem is that it is super hard sometimes to actually deal with a community, because you put an answer and then someone says like, this is not what I'm looking for, and they just leaves it. And it's like, it's too super hard, like to contribute to a question. Maybe Luke also knows the answer to this, but then the answer is not what the person is looking for. So yeah, back to the question. How do you do this, and how did you become the 0.49 top percent on Stack Overflow?
Yeah, I guess one of the answers to that is that I was around when Stack Overflow first started. So I've been a member of Stack Overflow for about 15 years.
Wow.
Stack Overflow was started by a guy called Joel Spolsky, who was part of that company. And I used to follow his blog because he had quite a wide-ranging interest across the whole of the computer kind of ecostructure. And so, in the beginning, it was quite loose, and there were all kinds of weird questions, and but now, like you say, it's got quite a lot tighter, and unfortunately, there are some people who probably have better things to do, who kind of get in the way and try and enforce stuff. But yeah, it's just really, I just got there because I just tried to answer like a question a day kind of thing. And I think I looked yesterday, I've answered about 1,700 questions.
Holy, wow.
So that's kind of how I did it. But I start off like across everything. And then I did a lot of stuff with ADFS. In fact, I think I'm still an all-time top contributor to ADFS, even though I haven't
Nice.
answered ADFS questions for about 2 years.
Nice.
But I guess no one else is either. Yeah, so I answered a lot of ADFS. I answered a lot of Windows Identity Foundation, which was their library for claims-based authentication. A lot of Azure AD, and then lately I really just answer Azure AD B2C questions.
Yeah, yeah. I actually really commend you on this because I've seen firsthand as soon as people get grab of you, someone knows that, oh, this is Rory. Immediately, a bunch of really complicated questions. I've seen it in meetups and I've seen it in person. You are the go-to guy when it comes to Microsoft identity. And believe me, it's not a small feat to actually, it's really hard understanding what is the person asking for. And then giving him an answer, at least that he would know, okay, yeah, this is what he is trying to do. And so it's just inspiring and amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I know there's also Q&A that goes on at the moment, but I just don't have the time to be across all of these things. So yeah, I answer the questions, well, the ones I can answer that come up. And I just keep on doing that. It's really just about helping people, I guess.
Good
That's
on you. Good on
I
you.
guess that's always been the driver.
I know Stack Overflow is now part of the Microsoft Q&A family of sorts under the Azure
Really?
tag.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's,
wow.
so it's Microsoft Q&A, and they've got like Stack Overflow Azure Collective or something.
Yeah, I'm a
That's
member
under
of
the
that collective.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
under the Microsoft sort of banner to help.
Ah,
So that's cool. So Rory, you've seen the evolution of the identity products across Microsoft, non-Microsoft, your blog. So 18 years of blogging under your belt. What keeps you inspired, and how do you maintain the high quality of your posts? Like,
yes.
there's always posts, at least once a month you have a post
Yeah,
up.
I would like to write more than once a month, but again, it's time. Time is so many other things to do. Yeah, so I originally started my first blog, which is called Random Thoughts and Collisions, which was on Blogger, because Blogger, when I started, was like the cool platform, and Google had just bought it. Unfortunately, Google never really did anything with it, and I don't think anything's happened to it for like the last 10 years. It's still around, but it just never got any better.
Yeah.
So yeah, I moved to Medium because that looked like,
Yeah.
something that was worthwhile, and that's got its own problems. But yeah, then there's just so many of these platforms at the moment. But I originally started writing the blog because I just wanted to record how I fixed issues so that I would remember that like in 6 months' time. And I
Nice.
actually still use the blog just to, I've seen that problem before. And I go, oh yeah, that's right. That's how I fixed it.
I love it.
And so it's kind of, again, helping people, and just like, especially in the B2C area and custom policies. When I started with B2C, the documentation was pretty lacking. So I just wrote a lot of B2C stuff, which was like stuff that I just did every day. But since there was no documentation about it, or very little, people started using it.
Nice.
And so I don't know, Ernest Hemingway, the famous author, basically once said, "There's no writing, there is only rewriting." So
Oh,
that's
wow.
basically what I do.
Okay.
Is like I write something and then I read it the next day and I make some changes and then read it the next day and make. So I probably just work on it for 2 or 3 days, before I actually
Love
release it,
it.
because that his basic thing was, you just keep rewriting that until you're reasonably happy with it.
Yeah, I can understand that. Even like there's a few blogs posts that like I've done where I reread it after the fact, and I'm like, why, that didn't make any sense, right? I need to tweak it. I need to update it. and you're consuming your own knowledge back again because you're
Mm.
reading it. So I haven't heard that quote before, but it makes sense.
I love it. That's an awesome quote, actually. It sounds like it's very similar. Like, for example, I take a lot of notes myself, but I think you are taking it the next level, which is putting your thoughts and ideas. It's almost like taking notes in public. So you put those notes so people would your knowledge in public, and then people would benefit from it, and you would also go back to it and then read it, which is just an awesome way of helping the community and helping yourself in the future as well. And talking about helping the community, I know that you are one of the forces behind Aotearoa Azure Meetup. You also organize Global Azure, and you also organize other meetups, right? You organize something related to .NET. Sorry, I couldn't find it. So can you tell us like some memorable experiences that you had and the impact of the meetup in the community?
Yeah, well, so before COVID, I was basically involved in 4 user groups, which was the .NET North Shore, the .NET Auckland, the Azure Lunchtime, and then the Azure, the Auckland Azure one.
The Auckland Azure.
We've now combined the Auckland Azure and the Lunchtime one.
Yep.
And the .NET North Shore one, times are tough. The place that we used to use, they basically wanted to charge us to use it. So it's kind of just not died. It's kind of like mothballed.
Yeah.
So COVID has, changed a lot of stuff. And when we did start up again after COVID, I think it was quite hard. But we're slowly getting the people coming along now.
Nice.
And we're also doing hybrid is also helping, so people can do it online.
Yeah.
And we did do a survey, and the top reason that a lot of people attended was actually for networking, because they just wanted to meet other people.
Correct.
So I think that's kind of the strength of the meetup, is that people still want to be there.
Nice.
Because the presentations hopefully are meaningful.
Yeah.
But also so they can meet other people and just network. And I think networking is really important.
Correct.
In terms of opportunities and jobs and things like that.
Yeah.
And we have looked. We are changing all the time. I think we are looking for more diversity. We're kind of moving into things like doing double headers.
Yeah.
Instead of just one meeting.
Yeah. Correct.
So you mentioned the Global Azure Bootcamp. So that actually started. There was a guy who used to work for Microsoft called Tiago Almeida, who was a developer experience guy. That team doesn't exist anymore. And he had some spare cash, and he basically said, "Hey, this Global Bootcamp is starting up. They've never done it before. And I've got some spare cash. Would you guys like to run it? Because we're not allowed to run it as a Microsoft thing." Yeah.
Fair enough.
So the first one, and Nick Westbrook, I think, was also involved in that, if I remember correctly. We ran the first one at Clifton's, and I think we had 2 tracks, and on a Saturday. And I think we sold all the tickets in something like 3 hours. Because Tiago had briefed a lot of people, and they were all waiting, and we put it up. Bang with it. Yeah, and that was a really, really successful event.
Nice.
And again, there was enough money for a few drinks after the boot camp at Clifton's, and a whole lot of people stayed, and like I said, just for the networking.
Yes.
And we ran one in one sense of another until COVID. The last one we did down at the grid. We had 2 tracks there, and we did that for the day.
Yeah.
But after COVID again,
it slowed down.
Yeah, well, basically, it's a lot more expensive now.
Fair enough.
People don't have money. Companies don't have money. I think the last one we got sponsored, but cost more than 10K, right?
Yeah.
To put on the whole thing and catering and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So it's not that easy anymore.
Correct. Yeah, I actually, one of my earliest memories of joining the Auckland lunchtime meetup, which is now Aotearoa Azure Meetup, was with a guy came in from Australia from Auth0. I
Yeah.
think you remember. Yeah, that was my first meetup, and the experience was to this day unmatched. It was held within Microsoft building, and like going into Microsoft, meeting people from Microsoft, and then meeting people in the community. So I like firsthand felt the power of the meetup. So it's just amazing. And you've been doing this for 10 years now, almost, right? Or is it?
Well, I you can't remember. I've been doing it in different forms for, I mean, I used to go, so that what is now the Azure Meetup was itself combined. There was like an Azure Meetup, there was a SharePoint Meetup, there was an Azure infrastructure Meetup, back in the day. And I used to go to those, so I kind of got to know the people, and then they all, meetups keep kind of combining and breaking out and stuff. Yeah, so I wasn't involved in the Azure Meetup then, but I mean, I went there so often, and we used to like go for a drink afterwards.
Just
sometimes.
became part of the family,
and
right?
I just became part of the family, and and then people left, and then they just asked me if I wanted to help run it because I was already running two others.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I got into it, really. It's just because I was there for most of the meetings.
Yeah, you are the force behind it now. You keep us all on track. I'm super happy that actually gave me the chance to be part of this. It is just amazing to be part of it. So really thank you for all that you do for the community.
Yeah, I also there's also, it's not a meetup, but there's a thing that I do in Wellington every year called the Wellington Code Camp.
Oh, okay.
And I went down to, I have spoken there a number of times, but of course COVID got in the way. But the talks I give there are quite different. Like the first talk I gave there was about NASA's Apollo guidance computer, which is the computer that put man on the moon, which was
nice.
a really interesting talk. But again, talking about the 60s, where they used the very first integrated circuit. Like that was the very first thing that ever used an integrated circuit.
Is that the one where the saying comes from that you've got more power in your mobile phones, than you did on what took the,
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
And I've done some other talks there about Ada Lovelace, who's the first programmer, working with Charles Babbage and the differential engine and
beautiful.
all that kind of. Yeah,
there's this book that is called Innovators. I think it's called Innovators. It's written about the history of computer, and then it's really, really good book, and starts with Ada Lovelace and goes all the way through to modern era. It is a really good book.
Yeah.
Innovators, yes.
Yeah, well, she did. I mean, she kind of documented a program for the differential engine, which was
beautiful.
a huge beast of a thing that did essentially very simple addition.
So let's discuss your MVP status. So Rory, you're a Microsoft Most Valuable Professional. Congratulations on the renewal for another year.
Congrats.
So you've earned it for the security, identity, and access category. Significant achievement. How is the MVP award influence you professionally, and what does it mean from a personal point of view?
Yeah, so that's quite interesting because I became an MVP because of everything that I had been doing in the community, rather than the other way around. I know some MVPs kind of say, I want to be an MVP, and then they go and do stuff that will help them. Whereas, I was like, I did all this stuff, and then I think one of the other MVPs, who's not an MVP anymore, nominated me because you could be nominated. And I think I was nominated twice.
Nice.
and I didn't get in. And then the third time I was nominated by someone at Microsoft, and then I got in. So yeah, it wasn't like I just walked in the door. I mean, how to become an MVP is something of a black art, I think. I don't think there's a manual you can follow. It's just,
fair enough.
you just have to, I mean, you have to know quite a lot technically, and you have to do a lot of stuff in the community. And in the beginning, there were people that were MVPs that literally all they ever did was run a meetup. I don't think you can do that anymore. I think it's
I think the criteria is a lot harder.
It's a lot
right?
harder. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And
I think
you have to be renewed every year, which is and a lot of people don't get renewed because they just want to try other stuff, or they've done their dash kind of thing. Well, they've been an MVP for 5 years, and that's enough.
I think that's a really good point. It's slightly off topic, but the MVP reward, you can get nominated by a Microsoft employee or another MVP, but it's an award based on your previous year. So it's award based. When you get the MVP award, you get all some benefits and stuff for the future year, but they're to help your community initiatives for the future year. But the reward is actually for all the stuff you've done in the past. So
yes.
you then have to get awarded, and then you have to go and write, this is the stuff to get renewed for another year. So
but it is pretty cool. I mean, I was quite chuffed when I became one, and you do get to go to Summit, which we went to this year for the first time.
Nice.
That was really cool, and Luke was there as well. It's really cool just to get across there, and I'd never been to Microsoft before. Have our picture taken in front of the famous Microsoft sign.
Nice.
And meet a lot of people in person. So yeah.
So do you think the MVP award has influence professionally? Like, so you're an independent contractor, are you? Do you think you get a lot of, has it influenced how the type of jobs you're getting, the type of work, the people coming to you? Has it helped?
I think it's helped, but I probably don't think it's the main thing. I think it's just another reason. I mean, people come to me mainly because of my blog and what they read on Stack Overflow.
Yeah.
I think just maybe when they look at LinkedIn and see I'm an MVP as well, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, makes sense.
Definitely another box that's been
ticked. It's the icing
there.
on the cake, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Actually, that's a very good segue to our next question, which is something I think really interesting. You are an independent consultant, so you work for yourself, which is actually something super cool. And so how have you been doing this for almost 3 years now, right? So like, tell us a little bit about that, and how do you feel, or like, how is it different now that you work for yourself?
Yeah, so there's a whole backstory to this. So I basically got very, very tired of the corporate rat race. Tired of body shopping and just the politics and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of figured out a plan, I suppose, of how I'm going to get to the point that I can be independent. And my goal always was to get people to come to me rather than me looking around for work. So the brand, so basically I built a brand. That's basically the key. So that's again all the things about Stack Overflow, my blogs, presenting to user groups, an MVP partly. And I needed to find a gap, something that I could offer people. So if I was just going to be a C# programmer, well, that wasn't an option because there's just so many. And I was lucky that B2C custom policies are quite hard, and that kind of is what people ask me to help them with. So So I've kind of got to the point now where I don't work on Mondays, so I only work a 4-day week, and I probably only work 15 to 20 hours. And I've got customers all over the world, again, just because they just read me and they've got questions.
Nice.
But so yeah, part of it, I think half of it is building a brand, so getting to the point that people find out about you and come to you rather than you having to run around looking for work. But the other half of it is the financial aspect, because obviously you're not working as much, and if I want to take a month off, I just take a month off.
Nice.
And so I've always been very interested in investing, and there's a thing called FIRE, which stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. You could go and Google it. There's tons of stuff about it. So I kind of followed that, and I've always been interested in investing. I've got a pretty substantial investment portfolio now.
Nice.
I do a bit of venture capital, stocks, bonds, crypto, ETF, managed funds, index funds.
Wow.
So that's the other thing is that I've got,
Wow.
you know what I mean? I've got the money that I don't have to work full time.
Yeah.
So
You've developed the freedom to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually amazing. I think you said two amazing, inspiring stuff. First of all, you planned for this. You didn't just say like, oh, you know what, it's quit now. It's quit time now. They're gonna do this anymore. And then the other plan is that you wanted people to come to you, so you build a brand as opposed to you going and well, nothing wrong with that, but you wanted a framework or like a way that people would come to you, and for that you figured that you need to build a brand. So this is really beautiful.
Yeah. So I think the whole thing took me about 4 years, to actually go to the point that I could just walk away from the corporate world, which I've never regretted. And it's awesome being your own boss.
Beautiful. Good on you.
But again, like again in the investment, I read a lot of books about investing. I mean, I read a lot of books anyway. My list is up on Goodreads. I think the last time I looked, it was about 1,200 books.
Wow.
So yeah, I just, like I say, like you said, you need a plan, you need a brand, you need to have spare cash. So that you can just afford. Yeah. And so the FIRE part of it is basically how you pay off your mortgage. So once you've paid off your mortgage, it puts you in a much better position financially.
But that potentially would mean sacrificing while you're still in that corporate life, right? To get.
Yeah, it meant a lot of after hours, a lot of weekends.
Good on
Yeah,
you.
so you've got, like I say, you've got to have a plan and you've got to stick to it. But it's definitely worth it.
Beautiful. Good on you.
That's awesome. Back to the sort of the technology element in the room. So are there any up and coming like Microsoft technologies that you're excited about? Obviously, the last 6 months alone have been product and feature after feature. But if there's any up and coming technology that you can share or you're playing with that maybe is in public preview or just something in general, could you share us a bit about it and what makes you excited about it?
So I guess one of my mantras is always be learning, like just don't stop. There's always, especially for me, I'm doing a lot of B2C custom policies and there's tons of work with that, but you kind of have to look at the future and say, well, that's not going to be around forever. So there's a thing called self-sovereign identity, which is becoming quite big, verifiable credentials, which I've again spent a lot of my own time. And in fact, I blog mostly on that at the moment. And that's really taking off. And even in New Zealand, there's a few companies that have started to do it. So that is, something, again, it's in the identity world, but I definitely think it's something that's going to take off. And again, it's good to be there at the beginning. But I'm there at the beginning because I you kind of monitor what's happening, and you say, well, this looks quite interesting, and you kind of bet on it almost.
Mm.
You're
Wow.
putting a lot of time, a lot of effort into it, and it looks like it's going to pay off. But
that sounds really interesting. Actually, I'm gonna go do some reading about it. Wow.
So the verifiable credentials is all about, like, you have your phone. This is me. You go to PB Tech or something, and the voucher code, I think, is, I've heard a demo or example before, right?
Yeah. So basically, there's an issuer, a holder, and a verifier. So let's say you work for Joe Blogg's company, right? So they would issue you a verified credential that proves that you work for Joe Blogg's company. All right. And you're the holder because the VC is on your phone. So in the Microsoft world, it's on Microsoft Authenticator.
Yep.
And then if you go to PB Tech and you say, and so you get it by scanning a QR code, and then you follow some steps and it gets put on your phone. And then you go to PB Tech and you say, hey, I work for Joe Blogg's company, and I know you guys give us a discount. And they say, sure. So they have another little screen with a QR code, which you scan. And they say, we only accept verifiable credentials from these 3 companies, which is like Joe Blogs is one of them. And then it asks you, please show us your VC. So you pick it from the list and you submit it, and then sweet, that proves you work for Joe Blogs company, and we give you the discount.
Oh, wow.
So in the States, it's used very widely by universities because so many people fake their credentials. So it's basically, if you say, I went to MIT and I've got a PhD, they say, well, show us your MIT credential and show us your credential for your transcript. And then, then that, yes, they went to MIT, and that, yes, they are a PhD, right?
I can see how that would be a big.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's really big.
That's huge. Yeah, that's huge in the States. Is that because, and so Microsoft, they bought LinkedIn, right? So they've also got a hook into LinkedIn, which is at a company level. So the company has to approach Microsoft to get hooked up. And then, like I can go to LinkedIn and say I work for Microsoft, right? There's no checking, right? But so with the VCs, if you say you work for Microsoft, when you put that on your profile, they say, okay, well, stop, show us your Microsoft VC. And if you can't show it, you can't say you work for Microsoft.
Oh, wow, this is really interesting.
Yeah,
Wow.
so you can
only
only put your name up there if you actually work for that company. All right, and when you leave,
it'll be revoked.
It gets revoked, right? And so then they remove it from your,
Yeah.
So it's like there's a huge area there where it just offers all these kind of. And I know, IATA and places like that are looking at it as maybe some kind of passport replacement.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's next level.
So so there's all kinds of things that is. So that's why I say it looks like it's really taking off.
Nice.
So, yeah.
I think this is one of the technologies that, it's not dependent on it, but I think this is one of the technologies that I think Azure, as the global, computer platform, can enables. Like, it's stuff like this that we wouldn't have been able to do as easily as we can these days. I think it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, that sounds like a really interesting technology. Wow. The other question, which is, what advice would you give to someone who's just listening to us, thinking about jumping into the world of technology, or they are just starting their journey? What would you say that would maybe help them, or make their journey make it easier, maybe, hopefully, something?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing is to do some research. So Stack Overflow have a developer survey that they do every year, and that ranks all the top technologies, that ranks all the top languages, it ranks which languages pay the most, etc., etc. So there's a wealth of information in it. So
That's a good advice.
that, like that is like if you want to go in, like what language should you do? And you probably find, I think the top one is probably JavaScript. So definitely do use that to kind of skill yourself up almost. So and that kind of leads into investing in yourself. So in other words, put money, pay for your own Pluralsight subscription or your Udemy or your LinkedIn or whatever, and put a lot of time and effort into actually upskilling.
Love it.
And keep, and like I said before, always be learning, ABL. And I think that makes you far more employable.
Yeah.
And they just like keep reading, keep researching, just keep learning. You don't want to be the dude that just works from 8 to 5. Go to user groups. Talk to people. Go to user group and network, and if you see someone, maybe the speaker, and go and say hi to them. And build your network, and that's the way you kind of get a sense of what's in the market, and maybe someone will like offer you a job.
Amazing.
But also, I also think that what you do in a company, you have to really try and make it transportable. So, I know some people that work for companies that have got proprietary systems, and so they're real gurus in that system, right? But when they leave that company, they actually don't know anything because they know everything about the system that no one else uses. So
that's very interesting, really.
Yeah. So like, kind of a really cool job would be like being in Azure, right? Where you're learning about API manager and you're learning about, front page, and you're learning about app registrations and all that kind of stuff, right? Because you can take all that knowledge to the next job.
We've touched a bit on this in the past, but I think like the New Zealand market's really interesting because you can be quite specialized in something, but it restricts you because in New Zealand, like I know the work that I do, one day you could be doing something with Azure Firewall, the next day you could be doing something with Azure Functions. It's completely different. You can't, if I was just specialized in Azure Firewall as an example, like I'm limited, I'm not as transportable, but the New Zealand market doesn't allow me to do that anyway.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're right. I think they really like this advice of transferable skill.
But remember, like what I do, I have lots of customers that aren't in New Zealand, so I'm not
That's a very good point.
I'm not restricted to the New Zealand market.
Yeah.
But you had a plan, so you knew that, right?
Yeah. So I think
that would be my advice as well. Always have a plan. Like, where are you now? Where do you want to get to? How do I get there? Like, if you want to get into, I don't know, some area of Azure that really interests you, like who uses that in New Zealand? Are they offering jobs? Go and work there and get that skill.
Yeah, that advice is just awesome. So like, have a plan, always be learning, go to user groups, network with people, reach out to people that that are expert in the field that you want to learn from, and then maybe even like put yourself for like to help in a user group or like on a community. You would be doing networking and also you'd be learning. So that's very like a really practical and I can awesome advice, as opposed to like being not knowing what to do. The first thing is like figuring out a plan and then jumping into finding a way to fulfill that plan. So that's a great advice. Thing for that.
Yeah, definitely.
So Rory, as we end our conversation, you've covered quite a breadth of information with us today and opinion, which is great. So thank you. Is there any like end insights that you all want to share about your journey that we haven't touched on, or are we?
Yeah. So one thing that I have been thinking about lately is, what is the future of programming? What is the future of being a developer? Because in the beginning, you had to do stuff, and there was no Stack Overflow.
There was
And,
books that you had to type.
and then, in fact,
Sorry.
yeah, in fact, there's a story that Stack Overflow went down, and they put up a thing that said sorry for the inconvenience, Stack Overflow is down. And then someone wrote, well, if Stack Overflow's down, how the hell are you going to fix it? Right? Because like, what's the first thing they were going to do is let's Google Stack Overflow for that bug. Oh shit, it's down.
That's so funny.
Yeah. So, and then I kind of used to see people stitching together pieces of Stack Overflow code, because you can just get the code, and that's kind of like was the next thing.
Mhm.
And then now we've got AI and ChatGPT and Copilot, and you know, and they do a lot of the stuff for you. Like ChatGPT can write you a website.
Correct.
So, you know, I kind of wonder where programming is going to go, because a lot of the stuff can just be automated.
It's very interesting. Like, you first talked about the internet, and the story you were telling us about like the internet and how huge it was going to be at the time. I think we are almost like in the same place now, where like we are maybe in 10 years we'd say like, oh, generative AI, ChatGPT was just starting, and it was not like this before. It was only text and blah blah blah. And you're right. It might be the future. The future is just like going to be really different from where we are now. It's very interesting times.
Yeah.
Oh.
Just a note with this whole Stack Overflow down. It reminds me of just a note to the audience: don't store your backup plans on the same file server that you're trying to restore, because if that file server goes down, you're going to lose your restore plans on actually restoring it. So I've seen that happen before. So when you were just talking about the whole Stack Overflow thing, it just reminded me of make sure your restore SOPs are actually somewhere completely different from the systems you're trying to restore.
Exactly. Out of band. It was just an amazing discussion, Rory. I really loved it all. That your story is just so interesting and beautiful, and it's just amazing the all that you give back to the community. You are one of the top contributor on like Stack Overflow, like in the community in New Zealand. So we thank you a lot for being here. And before we jump, just wanted to ask you if what people want to keep in touch with you, what do they like? What is the best way for them to do that? Or like follow up on your blog post and your content. Content.
So, you know, if people got questions on the blog posts and Medium, you can just post questions on the actual post. But if they want to contact me, I use Aotearoa, so Aotearoa, which is like a blog aggregator. So it's aggregated all my blogs together. So if you just go to aotearoa.com/Rory Braybrook.
We'll leave it in the...
At the top, you'll see there's a contact me button.
Beautiful.
And you can ping me on that.
Awesome.
Thank you. We'll put your contact details in the Azure All Stars page as well.
And in the YouTube video. Yep. So cool. Thank you so much, Rory, again. And your story was really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us. That was one of the that was an amazing episode, actually. We really loved it. And thank you for being part of this. And cool. just stay after the recording just a second.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Cool. Sweet.